In the shattered streets of Sevastopol, a 25-year-old history student named Lyudmila Pavlichenko pressed her eye to the rifle scope and counted silently. 309. That was the number of fascist soldiers she had put in the ground. 36 of them were enemy snipers, trained killers who had come to destroy her just as she had destroyed them. Months later, standing inside the White House alongside Eleanor Roosevelt, she would look a room full of American men in the eye and say, "Don't you think, gentlemen, that you have been hiding behind my back for too long?" She was one of 2,484 female snipers sent to the front lines by the Soviet Union. Fewer than 500 came home alive, a casualty rate above 80% that destroys any illusion this was a safer assignment. If you're interested in how wars are actually decided by logistics, math, weapons, and doctrine, subscribe now. Turn on notifications and stay tuned for more in-depth World War II analysis. Let's continue. In 1941, the Soviet Union stared into the abyss. Endless formations of German panzers surged eastward. Stuka dive bombers howled from clear skies. Soviet villages were consumed by fire in their path. Operation Barbarossa, Hitler's massive surprise assault, slammed into Soviet territory with devastating power. The Wehrmacht seized enormous stretches of land within weeks. The Red Army, paralyzed by chaos, was bleeding soldiers at a catastrophic rate. Whole divisions were wiped from existence. Shortages of weapons and equipment spiraled into full-blown disasters. Moscow itself lay within striking distance of Wehrmacht forward units. Stalin's government stood on the razor's edge of total collapse. In this hour of absolute crisis, Soviet commanders confronted an impossible problem. How do you halt the most devastating military force ever assembled when your armies are retreating, your factories are being evacuated, and your soldiers are dying faster than replacements can be trained? The answer came not from technological breakthrough, but from raw survival instinct. Snipers. A single marksman armed with a single rifle could neutralize targets of enormous value. German officers directing attacks, machine gunners holding defensive lines, radio operators calling in artillery strikes. One precisely aimed bullet could cripple an entire platoon. Enemy formations would freeze, dig in, burn precious hours, searching for a phantom they would never find. This was not a tactical preference. This was asymmetric warfare driven by desperation. As the Germans dug themselves into fortified emplacements and set up machine gun nests across contested ground, Soviet planners realized that hidden marksmen could control these killing fields. They could enable infantry advances without the tanks, the artillery, or the air cover the Red Army simply did not possess. The German dependence on static fortifications opened a vulnerability. Soviet snipers could dominate the ground between opposing lines using almost nothing. The decision was made. The Soviet Union would field snipers on a scale no army in history had ever attempted. Over 400,000 Soviet soldiers would undergo basic sniper instruction during the course of the war. Roughly 9,000 would earn formal recognition as elite marksmen. An unprecedented mobilization that turned the entire Eastern Front into a lethal chess match fought one round at a time. The weapon they carried was the Mosin Nagant 9130, equipped with a Pu telescopic sight. Approximately 53,000 of these sniper rifles rolled off production lines between 1941 and 1945. Simple, rugged, lethal. Cheap enough to manufacture in enormous quantities, reliable enough to operate through the savage Russian winter, and accurate enough to kill at distances between 800 and 1,000 meters. But in this desperate hour, Soviet commanders also understood something deeper. Here was a weapon system that demanded no factories and no complicated supply chains. It required only patience, skill, and the willingness to become a hunter of men. They would convert their greatest asset, the Soviet people themselves, into an army of invisible killers. These were not super soldiers. They were everyday Soviet citizens, hardened Siberian hunters who had stalked elk through frozen forests, young women hunched over university textbooks just months earlier, factory workers whose rough hands were still blackened with grease. Yet from this enormous pool of ordinary people, Stalin would forge his most terrifying weapon. The recruitment approach was ruthlessly practical. Soviet officers swept through rural areas searching for anyone with hunting experience, anyone who understood wind patterns, the discipline of patience, and the craft of staying unseen. Thousands reported to training camps without ever having touched a military rifle. But they brought knowledge passed down across generations: how to read animal tracks through snow, how to build natural camouflage shelters, how to remain completely still for hours on end. These ancestral skills would be turned into instruments of war. The training programs placed psychological endurance above everything else. Instructors put recruits through simulated artillery bombardments during live fire drills, extended sleep deprivation, anything that would harden them for the grinding nightmare of frontline combat. The curriculum went far beyond marksmanship. It taught how to withstand stress that would shatter ordinary soldiers, how to steady your breathing when every nerve screamed at you to run, how to lie in your own filth for 12 to 24 hours, waiting for a single opportunity to pull the trigger. And here is what destroyed every assumption about women in combat. Up to 2,484 of these snipers were women, the Central Women's Sniper. Training school became a production line of lethal precision. It graduated more than 2,000 women who were then sent to the most savage killing grounds of the war. This was no symbolic gesture. Fewer than 500 survived, a casualty rate exceeding 80% that obliterated any suggestion this was a safer alternative to frontline infantry duty. These women suffered through the same punishing training, shouldered the same rifles, and died in the same bombed-out ruins as the men fighting beside them. Their weapon reflected Soviet industrial thinking perfectly. While Germany manufactured fewer than 20,000 sniper-variant Kar-98K rifles across the entire war, Soviet factories turned out approximately 53,000 Mosin Nagants. The 3.5-power PU scope was cruder and more durable than Germany's 4-power ZEF-39, which offered greater precision but broke down more easily under extreme conditions. The Soviet optic could be repaired in the field. With basic tools, it performed flawlessly in temperatures that turned German weapons into frozen, useless metal. The rifle's effective engagement range of 800 to 1,000 meters surpassed the Kar-98K's 600 to 800 meters. It cost dramatically less to produce thanks to mass manufacturing methods and a simpler design. In a grinding war of attrition, these advantages compounded across tens of thousands of rifles. The Germans may have possessed superior optics under ideal circumstances, but Soviet snipers carried weapons that functioned when conditions were at their worst, in thick mud, in driving snow, in the frozen nightmare of Stalingrad. Armed with these unforgiving but effective rifles, hardened to withstand physical and mental extremes, these newly forged snipers were sent to the war's most ferocious battlefields. Two of them would rise to become legends whose names still resonate through military history. Look at this photograph. Lyudmila Pavlichenko in 1941, a 25-year-old history student. Dark hair swept back, eyes narrowed against the light, looking no different from any young woman you might pass on a sidewalk. Now look at this one. The same woman 6 months later. Her face carved by experience. A Mosin Nagant resting across her chest, her gaze fixed on a distant horizon most people would never know. She demanded to join the infantry, not the medical corps where women were typically assigned. The recruiting officer tried to turn her away. She presented her marksmanship certificate from a civilian shooting club. He gave in. By the time wounds forced her withdrawal from combat in 1942, she had accumulated 309 confirmed kills. 36 of those were enemy snipers, professionals who had been stalking her at the very moment she was stalking them. She became the highest-scoring female sniper in recorded history. Pavlichenko's personal writings and interviews expose the psychological toll of this transformation. She describes the rush of a flawless shot, the way seconds seemed to stretch as the crosshairs steadied on a target 800 meters distant. But she also recounts the raw terror of lying frozen in a shell crater for hours or even days, German boots stepping past within arm's length, the knowledge that a single sneeze, a single cough, One involuntary muscle spasm would be a death sentence. She writes about her fellow graduates from sniper school, the fierce bonds that formed between women facing odds that killed 4 out of every 5. The names of friends scratched out one after another. The contradiction consumed her. Pride in her craft next to dread of being found. The endless mental arithmetic of wind speed, range, the faint trembling in her hands from sheer exhaustion. She recorded flashes of pitch-black humor, trading jokes with other female snipers about which of them would be killed first. The grim comedy of soldiers who understood the mathematics of their own survival. Then came her second chapter. Too valuable to lose, too badly wounded to keep fighting, Pavlichenko was repurposed into something entirely different, a propaganda weapon aimed at the American public. In 1942, she became the first Soviet citizen ever invited to the White House to share her wartime account. Eleanor Roosevelt personally accompanied her on a nationwide speaking tour. At one event, facing a crowd of comfortable men who had never heard a weapon fired in combat, she delivered words that blazed across American headlines. "I am 25 years old, and I have already killed 309 fascist invaders. Don't you think, gentlemen, that you have been hiding behind my back for too long?" The audience fell completely silent, then exploded in response. Her story proved that the Soviet sniper war was a national crusade that transcended gender entirely. Female snipers endured identical lethal conditions as their male counterparts. The casualty rate, above 80%, confirmed their frontline combat role beyond any doubt. These were not nurses or clerks. They were hunters, killers, warriors who earned their place through blood and proven skill. While Pavlichenko was confronting American audiences with their own complacency, another sniper was carving his name into history among Stalingrad's devastated ruins. A shepherd from the Ural Mountains who would teach the entire world a new method of hunting human beings. Through your scope, you observe German soldiers navigating the wreckage of Stalingrad. They advance with caution, checking windows, scanning rooftops, but they do not see you. This was the reality Vasily Zaitsev mastered, a shepherd from the Urals who became the most feared marksman on the entire Eastern Front. Zaitsev brought a lifetime of wilderness hunting instinct into Stalingrad's urban killing ground. His impact was devastating and immediate. By the time the battle ended, he had registered 225 confirmed kills. But the kill count only tells part of the story. His real breakthrough was tactical. He created what became known as the Sixes, sniper teams of 6 men deployed in rotating pairs that covered overlapping fields of fire. This was not simply about putting more rounds down range, it was about keeping his people alive. While one pair engaged targets, a second pair watched, and a third pair rested. They could sustain continuous coverage around the clock, multiplying their lethality exponentially while shielding each other from German counter-snipers. The outcomes were devastating. Official Soviet estimates credit snipers with more than 11,000 German casualties during the Battle of Stalingrad alone. By late 1942, snipers made up as much as 3% of divisional strength, hard evidence that this was no longer propaganda, it had become formal military doctrine. The sniper war was now institutionalized at the tactical level, with dedicated platoons, receiving priority access to match-grade ammunition and specialized support. Then came the confrontation that transformed Zaitsev into a legend. The account describes a German sniper school commander named Major Koenig, dispatched to Stalingrad with a single mission: to kill Zaitsev. For days they hunted one another through the rubble. Decoy targets, psychological manipulation, patience counted in individual heartbeats. The climax arrived when a flash of sunlight caught Koenig's scope lens, and Zaitsev fired the round that ended the pursuit. Here is the reality. No German military records confirm that Koenig ever existed. The duel was almost certainly embellished, possibly invented entirely for morale purposes. Yet, its power was undeniable. Soviet troops believed every word of it, German soldiers dreaded the implications, and the psychological warfare it generated was as potent as any physical bullet. The story became a rallying symbol, proof that Soviet cunning could overcome German precision. But Zaitsev's most important legacy was not his rifle. It was his role as a teacher. In the ruins of Stalingrad, he trained dozens of students his comrades nicknamed the Zaishata, the little hares. He codified sniper techniques that had been improvised under fire into structured doctrine that could be passed on. Camouflage methods, optimal firing positions, how to decode German patrol routines, how to exploit the split-second lapses in attention that came with fatigue. His graduates fanned out across the Eastern Front, each one a force multiplier, carrying his systems into new engagements. The methods succeeded because they were elegant in their simplicity. Pairs of snipers working in tandem, one observing, one shooting, then rotating roles. Relocating after every third shot to evade counterfire, using the rubble itself as both cover and shooting platform, exploiting the German reliance on routine, on predictable movement habits bred by rigid military discipline. Zaitsev's principles spread through the Red Army like a wildfire. His students trained new students. Those graduates trained still more. The cascading effect carried his influence across the entire front. When the Germans eventually adjusted their own methods and sent their own counter-snipers, they were not facing a single shepherd from the Urals. They were fighting an entire generation of marksmen schooled in his doctrine. The Germans were watching, and they were evolving. They deployed their own hunters to track the trackers in a lethal contest where the smallest error meant instant death. The conflict had become a war of nerves. German after-action reports and personal letters from soldiers reveal a deepening psychological breakdown. Relentless alertness, operations grinding to a halt under fear. The horror of an enemy who could kill from 800 meters and disappear like a ghost. German snipers described their frustration at the skill and invisibility of Soviet marksmen. Fields of fire, the subtle patterns of Soviet movement. They fielded their own pairs and teams, employed decoys and false targets, and directed artillery onto any position that drew suspicion. The Eastern Front became a laboratory of lethal innovation where every new tactic immediately spawned a countermeasure. And the cost was staggering. The average frontline sniper's life expectancy was often measured in months because of their extraordinarily dangerous assignments. Female snipers faced the most brutal odds. Fewer than 500 of the 2,484 women who served as snipers lived to see victory. That casualty rate above 80% shattered any claim that this was a safer posting. The reasons were straightforward and merciless. Snipers operated alone or in pairs, frequently deep inside enemy-held territory or in dangerously exposed positions. They could not withdraw quickly once discovered. Artillery and mortar fire pounded their hiding spots. Without mercy. German counter-snipers tracked them with the same patience and precision they had taught the Red Army to dread. Every shot risked exposure. Every additional day in the field multiplied the probability of a fatal mistake. Many survivors carried wounds far deeper than anything visible on their bodies. Pavlichenko, like countless other snipers, battled severe post-war trauma and immense difficulty readjusting to normal life. She completed her history degree and became a public figure. But the woman who had tracked 309 human targets through a rifle scope found that peace refused to come in a world without crosshairs. The very abilities that had kept her alive, constant hyper-awareness, the capacity to remain motionless for hours, the relentless mental calculation of threat and distance, became burdens in civilian existence. Female veterans bore additional weight. Despite their extraordinary wartime heroism, many were met with gender discrimination. The Soviet propaganda apparatus had celebrated them as living proof of equality during the fighting. But once the war ended, society expected them to step back into traditional roles, to forget the killing, to become wives and mothers, and to never speak of what they had done. Yet, the legacy survived. Modern Russian military doctrine still positions snipers as a central element. They hold a revered place in the national consciousness. Veterans became enduring symbols of the Great Patriotic War's ultimate triumph. Their methods were studied, refined, and woven into contemporary military operations. The lessons radiated far beyond Russia's borders. Armed forces around the world adopted Soviet innovations, decentralized marksmen serving as force multipliers, psychological warfare elevated to tactical doctrine, urban combat principles forged in Stalingrad's wreckage, team-based deployment designed for mutual protection. The Ghost Warriors proved something essential about the nature of asymmetric conflict. That in total war, a single trained individual could shift the balance. That desperation could become the mother of invention. That ordinary people, shepherds, students, factory workers, could become instruments of strategic consequence when given the right training and the right mission. The scale of their effort remains unequaled. No modern conflict has come close to matching the Soviet Union's mobilization of 400,000 trained marksmen with 9,000 elite snipers operating simultaneously across a front line stretching thousands of kilometers. Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan all produced skilled snipers, but none rivaled the Eastern Front's industrial-scale deployment of invisible warriors. The psychological damage proved as consequential as any body count. German units redirected critical resources away from larger operational objectives to chase Soviet snipers. Morale crumbled under the ceaseless threat. Movement became hesitant, predictable, exploitable. The terror of an unseen killer who could strike from 800 meters away paralyzed initiative at every level. The ghost warriors of Stalingrad, Sevastopol, and 100 other battlefields paid a devastating price for their part in stopping the Wehrmacht. But their legacy, both the documented truth and the mythology, proved that in total war, the courage of individuals can tip the balance between empires. They were forged in the fires of Operation Barbarossa when the Soviet Union stood at the brink of annihilation and needed an entirely new kind of warrior. Stalin's ghost warriors, shepherds, students, factory workers, demonstrated that sometimes the most powerful force in a war of millions is one person with one rifle and one perfect shot. Their legacy lives on, not only in the 11,000 German casualties at Stalingrad or the 309 kills credited to Pavlichenko, but in the fundamental truth they revealed that desperation, resourcefulness, and individual courage can compound into a force capable of altering the trajectory of history, one bullet at a time. If you enjoyed this story, hit subscribe for more World War II historical deep dives every week. Thanks for watching.